I sat in my car outside the pharmacy, staring at the paper in my hands. The words blurred together, but one line stood out sharp and clear. Probability of paternity, 0%. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the page. Inside our house, through the kitchen window, I could see Lydia moving around, probably starting dinner. My phone buzzed. Her name flashed on the screen. Marcus, are you picking up dinner or what? I couldn't answer. My throat felt like someone had wrapped their hands around it and squeezed. 5 years. 5 years of waking up to his crying, teaching him to walk, reading bedtime stories. 5 years of being a father to a son who wasn't mine. The paper crumpled in my fist. My vision went dark around the edges. Another text came through, but I didn't read it. Instead, I whispered the question that would destroy everything. Whose child is it, Lydia? The silence in that car felt heavier than the truth I was holding. I remembered the day she told me she was pregnant. Her eyes had sparkled with tears of joy. I'd spun her around in our tiny apartment, laughing like a fool. We'd painted the nursery together, pale blue walls with white clouds. I'd stayed up late building the crib, reading the instructions 3 times because I wanted it perfect. Every doctor's appointment, I was there. Every ultrasound picture, I'd stared at for hours. When our son was born, I'd cut the cord with trembling hands. Nurse had placed him in my arms, and I'd felt complete. He has your eyes, Lydia had whispered. I'd believed her. But now, looking back, I saw the cracks I'd ignored. The late nights at the office that became routine. Her phone that she started guarding like a secret. The way she'd pull away when I tried to hold her. The distance that grew between us inch by inch until we were strangers sharing a bed. One night, her phone lit up on the nightstand. A message preview flashed. He can't know. Ever. I confronted her the next morning. Who can't know what? She'd looked up from her coffee, eyebrows raised in perfect confusion. What are you talking about? I'd shown her the message. She'd laughed, actually laughed, like I was being ridiculous. That's about my friend's surprise party. You know how paranoid she is. Her voice had been so casual, so confident, I'd wanted to believe her. God, how badly I'd wanted to believe her. She kissed my cheek and headed to work, leaving me standing in our kitchen feeling stupid for doubting her. But that night I couldn't sleep. While she showered, I'd glanced at her phone on the dresser. My hands had moved before my brain could stop them. She'd been deleting messages, lots of them. I'd scrolled through her contacts and there it was, Daniel, work. As I heard the shower turn off, I'd put the phone back exactly where it was, but I couldn't put back what I'd seen. The name burned in my mind like a brand. The neighborhood barbecue was supposed to be fun. Kids running through sprinklers, burgers on the grill, cold drinks in coolers. I'd been flipping burgers when Lydia's coworker stumbled over, drunk and friendly. You know what's funny? He'd slurred, beer sloshing in his cup. You and Daniel look so much alike, like brothers or something. I'd frozen, spatula in midair. Daniel, he'd nodded enthusiastically. Yeah, from Lydia's old office. You've never met him. That's weird, they were close. Before I could respond, Lydia had appeared out of nowhere. Her smile was bright, but her eyes were panic-stricken. Marcus, can you help me with something inside? She'd gripped my arm tight enough to leave marks. Right now, her coworker had wandered off oblivious, but I'd seen it, that flash of fear across her face, that desperate need to pull me away before I could ask more questions. Daniel, the name again. It couldn't be a coincidence. My friend Tyler worked as an accountant. I'd called him, voice shaking, and asked for help. I need you to look at something. We'd met at his office after hours. He'd pulled up our joint accounts, then frowned. Marcus, there are withdrawals here I don't understand. Thousands of dollars moved systematically over years. Small amounts at first, then larger. Where's it going? I'd asked. Tyler had dug deeper, tracking the digital trail through transfers and accounts. Then he'd stopped, his face pale. There's a separate account, in her name only. The screen had shown transaction after transaction. Money leaving our family and going. Somewhere, Tyler had clicked one more time. A payment history appeared. Regular deposits to an account belonging to Daniel Reeves. Who is this guy? Tyler had asked. I'd stared at the name on the screen, feeling my world tilt sideways. I'm about to find out. Lydia had an old tablet she'd stopped using. It sat in her desk drawer, forgotten. What she didn't know was that it was still synced to her phone. Every message, every photo, backed up automatically. I'd opened it with shaking hands. The messages loaded slowly, month after month of history. Then I'd found it, a photo album labeled private. My finger had hovered over it for a full minute before I could bring myself to tap it. The first image had destroyed me. Lydia and a man, Daniel, I assumed, in a hotel room. They were smiling at the camera, and between them, wrapped in a hospital blanket, was a newborn baby, our son, except he wasn't ours. The timestamp showed the photo was taken the day after his birth. While I'd been buying flowers for her hospital room, she'd been taking pictures with another man, with his real father. She planned it, I'd whispered to the empty room, from the start. I didn't confront her, not yet. Instead, I became someone I barely recognized, cold, calculating, patient. I started documenting everything. Screenshots of messages saved in encrypted folders, bank statements printed and hidden. I bought a small voice recorder and kept it in my pocket during our conversations. Every lie she told, I recorded. Every time she claimed to be working late, I noted the time and date. I created spreadsheets, timelines, evidence chains. My home office became a war room, and I was preparing for battle. The hardest part was pretending, kissing her goodbye in the morning, asking about her day at dinner, playing with our son like nothing was wrong. One evening she'd walked into my office unexpectedly. I'd barely managed to close the laptop and slide the flash drive into my pocket. "What are you doing?" she'd asked. I'd smiled. "Just work stuff." She'd lingered in the doorway suspicious, but she'd left, and I'd kept building my case. Our son's 5th birthday party was perfect on the surface. Balloons, cake, family everywhere. I'd been setting up the candles when Lydia had touched my arm. "Daniel's coming from my old work. He wanted to bring a gift." My hand had frozen. "Daniel," she'd nodded, casual as anything. "Yeah, remember, I've mentioned him before." She hadn't, not once. He'd arrived an hour later, tall, confident, carrying an expensive present. I'd watched them interact. The way her voice changed when she spoke to him. The glances they traded when they thought no one was looking. When it was time for cake, I'd held the knife and felt it shake in my hand. Daniel had scooped up my son, swinging him around. "Happy birthday, buddy, your godfather brought you something special." And that's when I'd seen it. As Daniel's collar shifted, a birthmark appeared on his neck. Small, distinctive, shaped like a crescent moon. I'd seen that exact mark before, on my son's neck, in the exact same place. I'd waited until our son was asleep, then I'd shown her everything. The messages, the photos, the bank statements. Her face had gone white, then red, then white again. "Marcus, I can explain." "Explain what?" "The affair, the lies, the fact that I've been raising another man's child." She'd started crying, collapsing into a chair. "I was lonely. You were always working." Daniel understood me. The excuses had poured out like poison. Daniel meant nothing. It was a mistake. She'd wanted to tell me but didn't know how. I'd stood there, letting her words wash over me like dirty water. "You didn't just cheat on me," I'd said quietly. "You stole my fatherhood. You let me fall in love with a child, build my entire life around him, knowing the truth the whole time." She'd looked up at me with red eyes, and then she'd said the words I'd never forgive. "Maybe he's better off with Daniel anyway." The silence that followed felt like the end of the world. I'd moved out the next day. No shouting, no dramatic exit. I just packed my essentials while she was at work and left. The apartment I'd rented was small and empty. I'd sat on the floor that first night, surrounded by boxes, feeling hollow. Meanwhile, Lydia had posted smiling photos on social media. "Sometimes you need to focus on yourself and your beautiful child." The comments were full of support. No one knew, no one suspected. She was playing the role of devoted single mother while I disappeared into silence. I'd let her think she'd won. Let her believe I'd gone quietly, too broken to fight back. Then, 3 days after I'd left, an email had arrived. The subject line read, "You deserve to know the full truth." No sender name, no signature, just an attachment. My cursor had hovered over it. Whatever was in that file would change everything. I'd taken a deep breath and clicked. The email contained everything I'd needed and more. Hotel records showing months of regular bookings. Credit card statements in both their names. Text messages I'd never seen before going back years. And a video file. I'd almost not watched it, but I had to know. The video showed Daniel at a bar, drunk and laughing with friends. "Man, I'm living the dream," he'd bragged. "Got this chick wrapped around my finger. Her husband's raising my kid and doesn't even know it." His friends had laughed. The video had continued, Daniel describing in detail how stupid I was, how easy it had been to fool me. I'd watched it 3 times, my rage growing colder each time. The next morning I'd called Tyler. He'd come over, read the email, watch the video. His face had gone hard. "We can ruin them with this," he'd said. I'd nodded. "That's exactly what I'm going to do." I'd hired the best lawyer Tyler knew. Her name was Patricia Hayes, and she had a reputation for winning impossible cases. She'd reviewed everything I'd brought her, every document, every recording, every piece of evidence. "This is airtight," she'd said. "We're filing for paternity fraud, fraud by deception, and seeking damages." Over the next 2 weeks, we'd prepared in secret. Affidavits, witness statements, financial documentation. I'd gotten the DNA test results officially certified. Tricia had worked like a machine, building an unbreakable case. "Are you ready for this?" she'd asked before we filed. "Once we start, there's no going back. It's going to get ugly." I'd thought about my son, about the 5 years of lies, about Daniel's laughter on that video. "I'm ready," I'd said. 3 days later, Lydia had received the papers. Patricia had arranged for her to be served at work in front of her co-workers. "Petition for paternity fraud" was written across the top in bold letters. I'd wondered what her face looked like when she'd read it. The news had spread like wildfire. Suddenly, everyone knew. Lydia's perfect image had shattered overnight. Her friends had started whispering behind her back. Her parents had called, demanding to know if it was true. Daniel had stopped returning her calls entirely. I'd heard from Tyler that she'd broken down at a coffee shop, crying to anyone who would listen. But no one had much sympathy. The details had leaked somehow. Maybe someone at the courthouse, maybe one of her former friends. People knew about the affair, the lies, the secret account. 2 weeks after the papers were served, she'd shown up at my apartment. I'd opened the door to find her mascara streaked and furious. "You're destroying me," she'd screamed. "Everyone knows I can't go anywhere without people staring." I'd looked at her calmly. "No, Lydia, you did that yourself." She'd tried to push past me, but I'd stood firm. "You need to leave. But now." She'd stumbled backward, shocked that I wouldn't let her in, that I wouldn't let her explain or manipulate or cry her way out of this. The door had closed between us with a final click. The custody hearing had been tense. Lydia's lawyer had argued that since I wasn't the biological father, I had no legal right to the child. Patricia had stood up, calm and prepared. Your Honor, my client has been this child's father in every way that matters for 5 years. He's the only father this boy has ever known. To remove him now would cause irreparable psychological harm. She presented letters from teachers, neighbors, even our son's pediatrician. All of them described the bond between us. The judge had listened carefully, then made her ruling. The court recognizes that biology is not the only measure of parenthood. Temporary shared custody is granted, pending further evaluation. Lydia's face had drained of color, then came the second part. Furthermore, Mrs. Bennett is ordered to repay all child support and face penalties for paternity fraud. The gavel had come down. Outside the courthouse, Lydia had been silent, staring at nothing. Her lawyer had looked defeated. I'd walked away knowing I'd won the first battle, but the war wasn't over yet. I'd found Daniel's wife on social media easily enough. Her name was Amanda, and her profile was full of happy family photos. She deserved to know the truth. I'd created an anonymous email account and sent her everything. The hotel records, the messages, the video of Daniel bragging. I'd even included the DNA test results. 3 days later, Tyler had called me. Have you seen Daniel's social media? Looked, Daniel's accounts were gone, deleted entirely, but the story was everywhere else. Amanda had shared everything publicly, tagging Daniel's employer and family members. His company had suspended him immediately pending investigation. His marriage had imploded spectacularly. 2 weeks later, Lydia had shown up at my door again, eyes wild. You ruined his life, she'd screamed. Daniel lost everything because of you. I'd felt nothing but cold satisfaction. No, I'd replied quietly. I just told the truth. You and Daniel did this to yourselves. She'd stood there, shaking with rage, before finally leaving. The silence after she'd gone had felt like victory. The hardest moment had come a week later. My son had been quiet all day during his visit. Finally, as we'd sat together on the couch, he'd looked up at me with big, worried eyes. Dad, yeah, buddy. His voice had been so small. Am I still your boy? The question had broken something inside me. I'd knelt down in front of him, taking his small hands in mine. Tears had burned my eyes, but I'd forced them back. Always, I'd said firmly. Nothing will ever change that. You're my son. Biology doesn't matter. Love does. He'd thrown his arms around my neck, holding tight. I love you, Dad. I love you too so much. Through the window, I'd seen Lydia's car parked across the street. She'd been watching us, and in that moment, I'd known she'd realized something terrible. Her son loved me more than he'd ever loved her. All her lies, all her manipulation, they'd gained her nothing. She'd destroyed her family for an affair that meant nothing, and now she was alone. The consequences had kept coming. Word had spread at Lydia's workplace about the paternity fraud case. HR had called her in for a meeting. Apparently, she'd been using company resources for personal matters, including meeting Daniel during work hours. They'd let her go quietly, but the damage was done. Her friends had continued to distance themselves. The invitations stopped. The group chats went silent. I'd heard through Tyler that she'd moved into a small apartment across town, nothing like the house we'd shared. She'd posted less and less on social media. When she did post, the comments were brutal. People she'd known for years had turned on her. Then the letter had arrived. Her lawyer was filing a defamation lawsuit against me. Patricia had laughed when I'd shown her. Let her try, she'd said. Everything you've revealed is documented truth. She has no case. But Lydia was desperate now, grasping at anything that might save her reputation. It wouldn't work. The truth was out, and there was no taking it back. The courtroom had been packed. Somehow, word had gotten out about the defamation case, and people had showed up to watch. Lydia's lawyer had argued that I'd maliciously destroyed her reputation. Patricia had stood up with a folder full of evidence. Your Honor, Mr. Bennett has only shared documented facts. Here are the DNA results certified by the lab. Here are the bank statements showing fraud. Here are the messages proving the affair. Then she played the recording. Lydia's own voice filled the courtroom. I was lonely. Daniel understood me. And then the moment that had sealed it. Maybe he's better off with Daniel anyway. The judge's face had hardened. Case dismissed. Mrs. Bennett, you have no grounds for defamation when the truth is being told. Lydia's face had drained of all color. Outside the courthouse, reporters had been waiting. Someone had tipped them off. Cameras had swarmed her as she tried to leave. Mrs. Bennett, is it true you committed paternity fraud? She pushed through them, hiding her face. The scandal had made the local news that night. I'd walked away from that courthouse feeling lighter than I had in months. The legal battles were mostly over. Now I could focus on healing. I'd started therapy, working through the betrayal and anger. My therapist had helped me understand that Lydia's choices weren't my failure. I'd thrown myself into work, earning a promotion. My boss had been supportive throughout everything, giving me flexibility when I needed it. Most importantly, I'd focused on my son. Every weekend visit, every phone call, every moment, I'd made sure he knew he was loved and safe. Slowly, I'd start to feel like myself again. Not the person I'd been before, that man was gone, but someone stronger. Someone who'd survived betrayal and came out the other side. Then Lydia had texted me late one night, "Please, can we talk?" I'd stared at the message for a long time. Part of me had wanted to ignore it, but another part needed to face her one last time. To close this chapter completely, tomorrow, 2 p.m, the cafe on Main Street, I'd replied, "Don't be late." She'd been waiting when I'd arrived, looking smaller somehow. The confidence she'd once carried had vanished. We'd sat across from each other in silence for a full minute before she'd finally spoken. "Marcus, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know." I'd listened without interrupting. She talked about her loneliness, her mistakes, how she wished she could take it all back. "I never meant for any of this to happen," she'd said. "I loved you." "But you loved yourself more," I'd replied quietly. She'd flinched but nodded. "Can you ever forgive me?" I'd thought about that question carefully. "Maybe someday," I'd finally said, "but forgiveness isn't the same as trust, and I'll never trust you again." She'd started crying then, reaching across the table for my hand. "Please, Marcus, we can start over, be a family again." I'd looked at her hand hovering between us, and I'd left it there. "No, Lydia, that family was built on lies. I won't live in a lie anymore." I'd stood up to leave. Goodbye. It was the last time we'd spoken face to face. A journalist had contacted me through my lawyer. Her name was Brenda, and she'd been working on a documentary about paternity fraud. "Your story could help others," she'd said. "Men who are going through this need to know they're not alone." I'd thought about it carefully. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about awareness, about helping other men see the warning signs I'd missed. "Okay," I'd agreed, "but I want to keep my son's identity protected." "Of course," Brenda had assured me. Scheduled the interview for the following month. I told a few people, and word had somehow gotten back to Lydia. Her lawyer had sent a cease and desist letter, threatening legal action if I appeared in the documentary. Patricia had responded swiftly. "Mr. Bennett has every legal right to share his own story." The letter had been ignored. Lydia had tried calling me directly, but I'd blocked her number. She'd sent emails that I'd deleted without reading. Nothing was going to stop this. The truth deserved to be heard. The documentary had premiered online on a Friday evening. "The Man Who Lost His Fatherhood" had been its title. I'd watched it alone in my apartment, seeing my story told through interviews, reenactments, and expert commentary. It had been hard to watch, reliving those moments, but it had also been cathartic. By midnight, the video had 10,000 views. By morning, it had hit 1 million. Comments had flooded in, stories from other men, messages of support, anger at Lydia and Daniel. The documentary had been shared across every social media platform. News outlets had picked it up. I'd become an unexpected symbol of resilience and survival. Lydia's former co-workers had shared it. Her old friends had shared it. Even some of her family members had shared it. Within a week, everyone in our town had seen it. There was nowhere for her to hide anymore. The truth had reached everyone, and it had resonated in ways I'd never expected. I'd started receiving emails from support groups, asking me to speak at events. The story had touched people deeply. 6 months after the documentary, my life had transformed. The small consulting business I'd started had taken off. Clients had sought me out, impressed by my resilience and integrity. But more importantly, I'd started mentoring other single fathers, men who'd been through divorces, custody battles, betrayals. We'd meet weekly at a community center, sharing stories and strategies. I'd help them navigate legal systems, cope with loss, and rebuild their lives. My son had grown too. He was thriving, doing well in school, making friends. The trauma of the situation had been hard on him, but therapy had helped. He was resilient, like his father. One evening, as we'd played board games in my new apartment, he'd looked up at me seriously. "Dad, yeah, buddy, you're my real dad," he'd said firmly. "DNA can't change that. My teacher told us family is about love, not blood." I pulled him into a hug, overwhelmed with pride and love. "You're absolutely right. And you're my real son, always." Life had a way of delivering justice. Lydia's new relationship, the one she'd posted about desperately on social media, had ended abruptly. Her boyfriend had found the documentary. He'd confronted her and she'd admitted everything. He'd left the same day. Now she was alone again. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd struggled to find work. Her reputation had followed her everywhere. The debt from the court's judgment had crushed her financially. Meanwhile, I'd just closed on a house. Nothing huge, but it had a yard and an extra bedroom for my son. He'd helped me pick out paint colors for his room. "Can we do blue with clouds?" he'd asked. "Just like my first room." "Absolutely," I'd said, smiling. One Saturday, as we'd moved furniture in, I'd spotted Lydia's car parked down the street. She'd been watching us unload boxes, seeing everything she'd thrown away. The house, the family, the happiness. I'd waved to my son as he'd carried in a small box of toys, laughing. Lydia had driven away slowly. Some lessons came too late. Years had passed. I'd stood in the crowd at the high school graduation ceremony, watching my son walk across the stage. He'd grown into an amazing young man, kind, intelligent, strong. As his name had been called, he'd looked into the crowd, found me, and smiled. After the ceremony, as we posed for photos, he'd put his arm around me. Thanks for everything, Dad, for fighting for me, for never giving up. I'd felt tears in my eyes. You never have to thank me for loving you. Later, I'd recorded a video for the men's support group. Lydia took my trust, my peace, my fatherhood, I'd said to the camera. But she couldn't take my strength. She couldn't take my son's love. She couldn't take my future. Behind me, my son had appeared in the frame, diploma in hand, grinning. That's because you didn't let her, he'd added. The video had ended with us laughing together. I posted it with a caption. Silence was what she expected, but truth became my revenge. Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times. Men I'd never met had commented with their own stories of survival. And I'd realized something beautiful. Out of betrayal and pain, I'd built something stronger. A real family, a real life, and nothing, not lies, not fraud, not betrayal, could ever take that away again.